This is not financial advice. I'm recording my thoughts about NIO. Its stock is currently trading at about $11.5 with a market cap of about $20 billion. There's a lot of discussion in the market that NIO could reach potentially about $70 in 2026. If that actually happens, that represents about 500% gain. So I wanted to have a quick relook at NIO because about 9 months ago, I made a video about NIO and I predicted $24 stock price in 2025. And I want to look at it again and see if anything has changed with NIO. First, I'm going to give some facts about NIO and then we can discuss the 2027 evaluation to see where the stock would be with respect to fundamentals. NIO, as we all know, is a Chinese EV maker. They do have multiple other businesses, but they do not contribute significantly to the revenue. So I'm going to predominantly talk about the car business and we'll have some assumptions about their other businesses numbers. NIO made about 100,000 cars in 2021, and this year they said they could make about 150,000, but it seems like that's not going to happen this year. When we look at NIO's popularity, if we look into the top 10 EVs sold in China, NIO doesn't even have one car in it. Most of the time, the top 10 spots are occupied by BYD, Tesla, SAIC, and Wuling. With this, we can definitely conclude that there are other brands within China that are actually surpassing NIO with respect to the number of cars they sell. And if NIO can come up with a cheaper model, maybe they will get into the top 10 spots, but NIO may not come up with that cheap model for years to come. NIO initially said that they can make about 350,000 cars in 2025, but with the pace that they are going now, they may be able to produce that 350,000 cars in 2026, not 2025. Let's look at NIO's evaluation in January of 2027. We do know that in 2021, they produced about 100,000 cars and made about $5 billion of revenue. I'm going to assume that they are going to grow their revenue at about 30% to make about $19 billion in 2026. Let's see if this $19 billion is realistic. When I look into the 2026 full year NIO revenue, I'm going to assume that they can make about 300,000 cars and price per unit would be about 50,000. So that's going to make about $15 billion revenue from the vehicle business. As you can see, I assumed about $4 billion of revenue from their other businesses, which seems really unlikely, but I'm going to be showing you an optimistic evaluation here. So $19 billion seems realistic to me. With reference to the net profit margin, I have assumed 15%, which is really optimistic because we do know that Tesla's gross margins are in the order of 30%. So I keep assuming 20% net profit margins for Tesla. But NIO is not like Tesla. NIO does advertise their vehicles and they do spend a lot on marketing, right? And we do know that NIO's gross margins are in the range of 13 to 15%. So assuming 15% of net profit margin is extremely optimistic. But I'm willing to have this 15% because I'm assuming that NIO will get very efficient in the coming years and achieve that 15% net profit margin in 2026. So $19 billion of revenue and 15% net profit margin will get us $2.8 billion of net income in 2026. And I think this $2.8 billion of net income is very optimistic and we will not know until we get to 2026, but I'm pretty sure they cannot exceed this $2.8 billion of net income unless some miracle happens with other businesses. Now let's look at the multiples. In my personal opinion, 20 multiple is sufficient for NIO because of its growth rate of 30% and net profit margin of 15% and the kind of sector that it operates in. So with a 20 multiple, this company would be worth about $56 billion. And let's say if market is really good in 2026, people will be willing to pay about 25 multiple for this company, which will result in a $70 billion market cap. And I have a red case, which I don't believe in at all. I don't think anybody would pay a 30 multiple for this company, but I'm just going to keep it because NIO has a lot of hype. So when there is a lot of hype, people will pay very high multiple. So with a multiple of 30, they would be worth about $84 billion in 2026. Now that we have three different market caps, let's look at the number of outstanding shares. Currently, they have about 1.6 billion outstanding shares. But since we know that this is a business that requires a lot of capital expenditure, they will have some dilution in the coming 5 years. So I'm going to assume about 4% dilution each year for the next 5 years, which will result in a 2.032 billion outstanding shares for this business. When I convert this into stock price, I see $27 in January of 2027 for NIO. And that's the case that I believe in, which is why I kept it in green. If there is hype, $34 and $41 are possible, but I'm not going to count on it. So if I want to make an investment decision, that should be based off of $27. Right now it's at $11, right? So that's about 150% gain, but I do know that there's a lot of uncertainty with NIO and there is a lot of risk of execution. And on top of that, this is a Chinese EV company, there is the delisting risk, and there's always the risk of the government with Chinese companies, right? So this is not a good enough risk reward for me. And when we first talked about this, people are saying this can go to about $70, right? I think that is not at all possible in my personal opinion, because the fundamentals are saying otherwise. I may consider buying this stock if it falls below $5, because currently at $11 the reward is only 150% and the risk is so much, right? If you have different thoughts about this stock and if you think this is going to go much higher than $40, I would love to know your analysis. I would love to know your thoughts. Please include them in the comments so I can also learn from you and we can also have a healthy discussion.